Welcome to Polyglot podcast. I'm Christian, the host, and today we have Chiara as a guest. Welcome, Chiara.
Thank you.
So, where are you now?
So right now I'm in the Netherlands, where I've been living for quite a few months since October, but I'm originally from North Italy.
Where is your hometown in Italy?
My hometown is between Milan and Bergamo, which is in the region of Lombardy in northern Italy. I come from the province of Bergamo myself, but yeah, it's quite in the center of the north.
Yeah. So between Milan and Bergamo, is it a city or a small village where you live in Italy?
Yeah, I'm always kind of unsure whether I should categorize it as a town or a village. Kind of depends on a town or a city or a village.
Yeah.
Kind of depends on the person. It has 30,000 inhabitants, so I would say town.
Yeah.
It kind of has everything you need, but it's not really big city with lots of stuff to do, I guess.
Yeah. 30,000 in Italy, I guess it's not big.
Yeah.
Usually the first question is what is your mother tongue? But I think it's obvious, but you can start with this question.
My mother tongue is Italian, and I would also say my dialect, which is Bergamasque, which is a Gallo-Romance language, and it's kind of the same as French or Spanish is to Italian. I don't really speak it much actively because nowadays it's mostly the older generations who speak it for like everyday things, conversations and all. But I've grown up also with my grandparents, so I also consider it my mother tongue, even though I happen to speak it more to myself than to others. But
what was it called? Berganesque?
In the original version is Bergamasque, and in Italian it's Bergamasco.
Mm-hmm. So in Italian Bergamasco, and in Bergamasco it's Bergamasque, or how?
Yeah. In Italian, you might know that something a special feature of Italian is that it's like almost every word ends with a vowel.
Yeah.
And while some dialects, especially dialects from the north, they don't really have that many vowels. And now I have to start a really long story, but
sure,
basically
we have time.
What is Italian nowadays is actually Tuscan. At some point, they decided that they had to pick some variety between all the regional languages of Italy, which are all the same as French and Spanish, but just in Italy. And they ended up picking Tuscan because of various reasons. Dante is the most important Italian poet and of the Middle Ages, and together with other two, Petrarca and Boccaccio, they were you could say the fathers of the Italian language, and there was that reason, and then also the fact that Tuscan is kind of more similar to Latin, like words often end in vowels and all, while my dialect or my regional language, if you want to call it like that, is more like it is technically a bit closer to French. And it also has a lot of sounds which don't exist in Italian. For example, it has and U.
Oh, like in Finnish and Swedish, the and U.
Like Italian just has I don't know if you can call them like that, but I would call them pure vowels. So you only have A, E, I, O, U. A and O can be open, so you have E, O, O, but it's just those. We don't have any schwa or or mixed vowels.
Yeah.
While dialects of the north have them, at least some dialects of the north have them. And besides that, it has consonant clusters which don't really exist in Italian, like ch and stuff like that. Like children or young people is chech, and it's not really a sound that you would find chech.
Like giovane instead of giovane, chech. Or
chech. It has an S and then ch. It's like a boy is chet is the singular and plural becomes chech. So that's another thing that's quite not Italian at all, because it has, like, if a word ends in T at the singular, the plural becomes ch. And in Italian, you basically just have a vowel switch system, which is, you have the O at the singular, that becomes an E in the plural. If it's masculine, if it's feminine, it has an A in the singular, which becomes an E in the plural. And it has all these things, and then it has some Germanic-like features, like if a word ends in D or G, it sounds like T or K. So it's I can't remember the exact linguistic terms, but basically that. So to see is et, and in Italian it's vedere. So you have, let's say, the root of the word as D, but in my dialect it becomes a T because the D sound is at the end of words.
Yeah.
Kind of complicated, but, and like in German, that if you have a D at the end of the words, it sounds like a T. Basically the same thing as it is in German and Dutch.
So Beegamàsch has got maybe some influence from German, or?
Yeah, probably. There are lots of substructures, if you say so. So basically the first inhabitants of my area were Celts, and then you had the Romans, which brought Latin, and you had the vulgar Latin language, but it has a Celtic base. So, for example, many words in Latin which were with an U, so U sound became U in dialect. And I had studied, I'm not 100% sure that's true, but that's what I remember from my studies, linguistic classes at university, that because of the Celtic roots, some Latin words kept being Latin basically, but got kind of bent in the Celtic way. And then afterwards you had all the Germanic invasions, and that contributed mostly for vocabulary. And probably also pronunciation, I can't say for sure, but we just had so many people coming and going in Italy, so that's, yeah, it's just a big mix.
Yeah. So Celtic languages influenced maybe 2,000 years ago, or maybe even longer, 3,000.
Yeah, the Romans conquered northern Italy, I think, at the beginning of the first millennium.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then you had the Germanic invasions were mostly, I think, like 300-400 after Christ. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
That's I think more or less. So yeah.
Yeah. What about your parents. So you mentioned your grandparents mainly spoke the Bergamasque dialect. How was it in your parents' case? Did they also speak it, or was it then standard Italian?
Yeah, so my dad, I would call him a perfect bilingual person.
Yeah.
Because he grew up in a household where only dialects were spoken. Still today, my parents, yeah, of course, my grandparents, sorry, of course, they speak Italian, but you can hear well that it's not like their native language.
Yeah.
For example, my grandmother often makes the mistake that when she says so, she uses the feminine in Italian because in dialect it's feminine, but in Italian it's masculine.
Which one? Which word?
Salt, sale, sal in dialect.
Okay.
But my dad grew up in such an environment, and then he went to school, and of course everything is in Italian. Then maybe you have conversations with mostly people of his family, but then also friends and all in dialect. But your education is in Italian, official stuff is all in Italian. And when he went to school, for example, he learned Italian at school basically because he only spoke dialect. So, and yeah.
So basically, people speak their dialect at school, at home, and when they go to school, they start speaking with the teachers like standard Italian.
Yeah, that was like that. For my generation is different because probably because the generation of my parents got so, at least in my area, they got so used to speak Italian, also having a higher level of education and all that, that they didn't really talk to their children in dialects as much as my grandparents did. So for people who don't have or who didn't have their grandparents growing up, of course it's harder to speak dialect fluently or speak it at all actually. And in the north it's also more common that there are many, let's say, mixed couples, so maybe your parent is from your hometown but the other parent is like from the south or something, so they don't really speak dialect with each other, they speak Italian.
In your case, are your parents both from the same area, or at least northern Italy?
Both from the north, but my mother is from a different area. So she grew up in Milan, but her parents are, my grandmother comes from Veneto, which is another region in the north, region of Venice. And there they speak Veneto, but my grandpa, he is from another city. He comes from a village, but it's another province, which is a province of Mantua. And they speak another dialect there, of course. But since they came from different regions and they also moved to Milan, they just spoke Italian to each other, I guess. When my grandmother goes to her region, then she speaks dialect with her family and all, but they grew up speaking Italian. My mom and her siblings grew up speaking Italian. And in Milan, the dialect is not much spoken because it's a big city and a lot of people coming from different parts of the country. So the dialect is not really alive, sadly. But that's it. So, but my mother, after she came to my town, which is the native town of my father, she slowly also learned a bit of dialect by constantly communicating with my grandparents, and she doesn't really speak it actively, but she understands it and all. So, and for the native languages of my family, I think that's all. We don't have any origins in any other country or anything else.
Yeah. So you were also exposed to the Venetian dialect from your Like, was it grandma
From,
or yeah?
no, not really, because she lives in Milan and they've always spoken Italian.
Ah, okay.
I don't know if maybe once in a while she would say something in her dialect, but I don't think so. But she's been living in Milan since she's like 30 or something. And by living with a husband who's not from your area and
Mm,
goes, I never really heard her speaking Veneto actually. She does when she goes to her hometown and all, but no.
yeah.
Though, of course, I have a minimum exposure to Veneto because of TV and all. So you have sometimes people speaking it, but not really from real life, let's say.
Yeah. What do you think? Which dialects are the hardest for you to understand?
Um, well, I would say the dialects of the south, technically, because they're the furthest from my own dialect. But the thing is, um, you get to actually hear dialects of the south, especially Neapolitan, a lot on TV and media and all that, because they really speak it a lot there. And any social classes, they really keep it alive, unlike us.
Yeah,
And probably it also helps that that area doesn't have a big migration from outside because it's poorer all you want, but they don't have as much migration from outside as the north has. So that it's also easier to keep it, you know? And yeah, but otherwise, I can't really say actually. Like Veneto is
mm,
quite easy to understand. I don't know why, but it's not that different from Italian, or at least I understand it quite well. Some time ago, we had partners from that area who came to my office um, for business and all. And
yeah,
every now and then they were speaking in dialect, and I was understanding perfectly what they were saying. Um, I've heard many times people saying that my dialect is very hard to
mm,
understand, probably because of old sounds that are kind of hard for someone who's not used to it. While Veneto has quite, it doesn't really have weird sounds coming from an Italian perspective. It doesn't have any ch, u, and all that, which might sound weird. Then you have other dialects, other Gallo-Italic dialects, which are the dialects of northwest Italy, which are also close to mine. So technically, even though I never really get to hear others, I never really get to hear the others. I should be able to understand them quite okay.
yeah,
Then you have the Central Italian dialects, which are basically Italian, because that's where the Italian we speak nowadays come from.
hmm
So they're barely dialects. Maybe I think they could be even called vernacular
yeah,
languages. I hope nobody gets offended.
yeah. Let's hope that.
And yeah, so it's a hard question. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, maybe some dialects of the South or
Yeah,
Sardinian, but I can't say because besides Neapolitan and
hmm
Roman, which is not really a distinct language, is more like, at least from what I hear on TV and all, it's more like really Roman Italian.
yeah,
So they say like che instead of chi. It a few changes and they like cut the ending part of the verbs, but and they have their own slang words just like anybody else. But yeah,
yeah.
hard question.
Do you have any example phrases in your own dialect that sound really different compared to standard Italian?
And could you start speaking that? Or I could read a part of the Little Prince book that I have in my dialect.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of depends on the parts. Some parts are really similar, some are not. It's, yeah. Okay, so Ude ho resto sol tramontate 43 volte e dopo il moment se me deci per sé quando se piede tristezza lei piacere a daga al sul per cara. Ho di 43 volte se le tocca fa piede tristezza ma al principio la mia respingi. So here I would say that it's quite similar to Italian, but a person who's not used to it might get kind of lost with sounds. So in Italian, it would be detto. In dialect, it is dec.
Like said.
And if you're not familiar to it, you just hear all these sounds, and or like for example, ardaga, which is to see it, kind of. In Italian, it would be guardarlo. So you see that it has the same roots, but if you're not familiar to it, you might not recognize it, I think. Right, yeah. Yeah, I would say that it's not really that different. It's more like the different sounds might confuse you if you're not used to it. But it's kind of hard to judge because I'm an insider.
Yeah. And how do you find the Little Prince in different dialects? Are those online, or did you find somewhere close to your home from a bookshop, or?
This book, I had found it at a big bookshop in Milan, and they made many different versions of the Little Prince in many dialects of Italy. So this was kind of easy to find because they did it on purpose. If you want to read books in dialects, though, you barely find any. Maybe there are some like publications of like poetry in dialect and all that, and they also had, for example, some theater plays in dialect that they had in my town's theater and all that. But to find book in dialect, I think it's really hard.
So this is not common and maybe part of some preservation project, or what do you think?
You do see sometimes things like, as I said, theater in dialects and maybe some small poetry project, but it's not really standard. Like if you go to the bookshop of my town, they will probably have something, but you will definitely not find the translation of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Maybe Harry Potter, you find it of the Little Prince, so maybe also Harry Potter. But like it's not really the standard, and unless you're like a person really focused on like maintaining the dialect and revitalization and all that, you're not gonna write a book in dialect. It has to be something really related to some projects with the dialects, but otherwise I don't think it's gonna happen. Sometimes I write down things in dialects, like a grocery list or stuff like that. But I don't think there are many people who do that.
Yeah.
Even my grandparents, they speak it, or my dad, they all speak it, and definitely better than me, because I learned it more in a passive way. As a child, I would always reply in Italian. I was never really expected to speak dialect. But I can write it, and they don't, or they find it really hard to write and to read because they're not used to it. And like I'm also a person into linguistics and all that, so I can reproduce the sound into a word with like all the rules. Like I write it with the dots,
umlaut,
while they don't really recognize it. Like, of course, they reproduce the right sound when they speak, but then they would just write it like a normal U because they don't really have the idea, oh, this is U and not U. They just write with like with the Italian framework. So reading it is not really easy if you're not used to it. Especially if you're only used to Italian, because Italian is very easy. Like, we don't eat up letters. You read all that's written, and we speak quite in a clear way normally. While dialect is more complicated. Like, you have a lot of words that get eaten, letters that get eaten, ending letters that have a different sound than what it's actually written. Like I was saying, like a word which ends in D, at least that has its root with a D, is pronounced like a D. And then you have all these ch sounds that you can't really write in Italian. There's no way to write them. So a person who's only used to Italian wouldn't know how to write it down if you never read dialect. So yeah, like we have a sort of magazine that is published every year, once a year in my town, and it's almost all written in dialect.
Wow.
And it's called Polyglot. But besides that, there's not really a big literary production.
Yeah. And is it also common that young people don't speak dialects all over Italy, or what's the situation like?
It really depends on the area. Generally, in the north, they do it less than in the south. But it also depends. Like, as I said, in Naples, I think Naples is the place where they speak dialects the most, more than Italian. Even at a semi-formal level, they will still speak dialect. And in the north, especially in Milan, they barely speak it at all. Like, young people, even people who are native to the area, with parents native to the area, barely know any words. They know like sayings, things like that, some random words, but they can't really. I don't think most people my age will be able to keep up a conversation in dialect in Milan. But even in my town, it also kind of depends of people not caring so much about it. I still remember when I was younger, to me, dialect was the language of old people. So I remember once that a friend of my grandma was visiting, and she wasn't speaking in dialect, she was speaking Italian. And I was thinking that was really weird, because I would expect every old person to speak dialect. And she wasn't, and I had asked that, and my grandma had said, it's because she worked in a school or some office job, and so she wasn't really used to speak Italian, to speak dialects anymore. And I think that says enough. It's kind of people that got into office jobs or stuff like that, or got higher education, didn't really, they kind of stopped speaking dialect, even those who could. And also the grandmother of the person I knew, this, let's say, friend of mine, said that her grandmother would speak dialects to her friends, like people of the same age, but she never spoke it to them. And her grandmother had, I don't know exactly what education, but let's say she had like a high school degree, which was quite good at the time. While my grandparents have like just elementary school, so they never really got to a point where like they were expected to speak Italian. While if you studied to become a teacher or anything, you would end up speaking Italian all the time, which is kind of wrong because a language shouldn't be connected to your social class or shouldn't really have some kind of social value that if you speak Italian, if you speak dialect, you're just a poor farmer or an ignorant person. But I guess that was kind of the vibe. And then people didn't really pass it on to the younger generations and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's continue with your life story. So you were born in northern Italy and grew up in the same. You went to school in the same place until you were an adult.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this village of 30,000 people, at school, what was the first language you started learning?
The first foreign language is English, and we started in the first year of elementary school, so age 6. Actually, we even started learning a few words here and there when I was in kindergarten. And yeah, but for 5 years, it was all basically about numbers, colors, and vocabulary like animals and clothes and simple phrases like I am rich, I am poor, and all that. How are you? What's your name? You know, that stuff. And then when I went to middle school, we were introduced the second foreign language, and for me it was French. And after that, I chose high school type, which is the foreign language high school type in Italy. And I also started German and Latin. And yeah, that was pretty much the foreign languages I studied at school.
I want to know more about the Italian education system. Can you tell the names of different levels and in Italian and which grades they include? For example, in Finland, we have elementary school is like grades 1 to 9, but it consists from 2 parts. Ala-aste grades 1 to 6, yläaste grades 7 to 9, and then after that high school, which is lukio, grades 10 to 12. So how is it in Italy?
Yeah, so elementary school or primary school is 5 years. So grade 1 to 5. Yeah. Then middle school is 3 years. High school is another 5 years.
Okay. What are they called in Italian? Scuola primaria? Something like that?
Yeah, scuola primaria or scuola elementare. When talking, you just say le elementari. Then scuola media or le medie. And then you have scuola superiore or liceo. Though liceo is a type which has other subtypes in it. But general term for high school is scuola superiore.
Okay, and after that, yeah, university.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you took French, at what grade were you? Was it sixth or seventh?
Sixth grade, yes.
Yeah.
Sixth to 8th grade.
And
And
was
then I
it
continued with, yeah.
was it optional or was it a mandatory second language? Were everyone forced to learn a second foreign language, or was it optional?
Yeah, it was mandatory. Kind of depends on the school, what your second foreign language is. Usually it's French or Spanish, or also German. It's always one of those three. In my middle school, they only had French. In another middle school in my town, they only had Spanish. In another one, you had the choice between French and Spanish. And it's mandatory. In middle school, I guess the idea is that they kind of want us to experiment with many different subjects, which you don't really have later. So most people in high school only have English, but in middle school, for those 3 years, you have the second foreign language. And then you also have things like art and music, which most people don't have when they go on with high school. And I first really disliked French for some reason. I even told my teacher at the time that I hated it for some.
Okay.
Yeah, I was really blunt.
Why was the orthography, the pronunciation, grammar?
Nah, I don't know. For some reason, I didn't like it. I think it was my sister's influence, and like the rivalry between Italy and France. I guess that's
really that influenced you.
But still, I was quite good in it. Not like I studied a lot, but I was okay. And then in high school, for people who attend the language type of high school, you have 3 foreign languages, of course English, and then the other 2 kind of depends on your combination on your school. But usually it's always between French, German, and Spanish. In my case, I could choose between German and Spanish, and they had French mandatory. And though you could also put the option that you would have liked Spanish and German, and if they had enough people, they would have made a class for it. But I had already started French in middle school, so I thought, let's continue with French. And I ended up actually liking it after a couple of years, and now I actually enjoy it. I wouldn't call it my favorite language, but yeah, I am really glad I got to study French in the end.
Yeah.
And I guess I like it more than Spanish, actually.
Okay.
Still, I hope I'm not offending anyone.
You took Latin and German also in high school.
Yeah, Latin was just the first 2 years. People 2 years and older than me had it for 5 years, but then they had some reforms and all. So yeah, we only had the first 2 years, and I also really disliked it. I think because it was a dead language, so I was like, why are we even learning it? I can't use it for anything. Then years after I was already done with it, I actually kind of started appreciating it, if not liking it. And probably if I were to go back, I would study it with a bit more passion.
Yeah.
But yeah, just learned very basics.
And was Latin mandatory or not?
For us, it was the first 2 years, and it was mandatory.
But only in that high school because it was a language high school.
Yeah, that and a few other types, but it's definitely not mandatory for all Italian people in high school.
Yeah, but
Only
was it before?
No, it was
Never.
always some types of high schools. The licei.
Yeah.
So if you do some other, let's say, more practical high school, you're not gonna have lessons.
Yeah. So what happened after high school? Where did you go next?
After high school, I want to go on languages. So my study was called Mediazione Linguistica. It would be language mediation in English, and it was kind of languages and cultures. So history and some history and literature and those things, and then various subjects like various classes like economy, geopolitics, linguistics, of course,
And this was university.
and this was university, yeah. And that was
how old are you when you start university in Italy? 16, 17?
19.
No, okay, same in Finland. We are 19, 20.
Because we have 5 years of high school, so we end 1 year later than the world average. I guess most people in the world are done with high school at 18, but we are at 19, or at least in the year you're supposed to turn 19.
Yeah.
And I turned 20 in my first year of university.
I guess you moved away. I think in a town of 30,000 people, you don't have a university, or?
That's correct.
Yeah.
They don't. Though once I was crossing the street, I was waiting for the traffic light to get green, and I was on my bike, and there was some old man who said like, "Where are you going at this hour?" Because it was like I wasn't going to school because it was too late for going to school, and I said like, "Oh, it's university, taking the train," and it was like, "Oh, it's really crazy that we don't have a university in a town like my town." And I was like, "Well, what do you expect? It's not a metropolis or something." But yeah, so as I said, I didn't move out, but since my town is quite close, to avoid paying a ridiculous amount of money for a flat, for a shared flat, I went to university by train. Half an hour by train or something.
In which city was that?
Milan.
Oh, Milan. So only 30 minutes by train.
Yeah, at least the fastest train, but yeah, between 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah. And in Italy, I guess you don't have any like, what's it called, tuition or some money that you get to like pay the bills if you're a student and anything.
No. Well, actually, there's that possibility. If your family income is under a certain level, then you have the right to ask for it. Though I don't know exactly how it works because my family wasn't poor enough to get it, I guess.
Yeah.
So you can get, I'm not exactly sure how it works. Maybe you don't get money, but you don't have to pay university.
Yeah.
You basically have it for free.
So all the universities cost something.
Yeah, unless, as I said, your family income is level, but it's.
And do different universities have different costs?
Yeah, you have the public universities. The average, I think, is like between 1,500 and 3,000 a year. And then you have the private ones, which can be 10,000 euros a year.
Mm.
So yeah, you always pay something, but it can change quite a lot if you go to a private university or a public one.
And
And
do you know, is there like big difference in the quality, or if it's a more expensive university, is the quality also better of the teaching there?
More than the quality of the teaching, from what I've heard, but I'm not sure because I've only attended the same university. It's more about the chances you have in the job market once you're done. Like a private university is more likely to have many connections and make your way into the job market easier, while in the public ones maybe kind of harder because we don't have all those connections.
So it's more maybe about connections and having a like more prestigious name of the university, maybe, or
yeah. A typical example for that is like the Bocconi University.
what was it?
It's called Bocconi, economy mostly. So yeah, what you hear is that people who get out of it have like have it easier in finding something, or because of the university connections, like finding something more easily. But yeah, I can't really judge for the quality of teaching because I don't have experience for that. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And in the university, which languages did you study there?
English and German, and that was with my bachelor. With my master, I also attended some classes of Dutch, but that was kind of unofficial because formally I was attending German, but I knew that the university offered Dutch as well, and I technically didn't have a second foreign language, a third foreign language, but my master's university was quite small, so I would just know the professors and join the classes, and they were completely fine with it. So yeah.
Yeah. And what was the name of the degree? Was it when you graduated? Was it the philology, or what did you become when you graduated?
We don't really have a title for that, I think. It's more like in Italian they say you're a doctor, so a doctor in mediazione linguistica. And for my master, I studied international communication, and it was, I think, still doctor in international communication or something like that. I don't think we have a title, specific title.
Yeah. And how many years ago was that when you graduated?
From my master, I graduated last September. So as soon as I graduated, basically, I moved to the Netherlands.
Yeah, because I was thinking, you had some Dutch classes and now you live in Netherlands. So how did you end up there and why?
So I basically just wanted to have some kind of experience abroad. I already had a an internship, in Italy, and I wanted to maybe try out another internship abroad. Then I ended up finding an actual job, and I had various countries I wanted to. I was various countries I was interested in, and basically all North Europe.
Which ones specifically?
So Scandinavia, not Finland because my Finnish is really basic.
Yeah.
But I looked up some things in Denmark, Sweden, Norway also not, I think, but still it was in my mind.
Yeah.
And then Germany and the Netherlands. And I ended up finding what I eventually found in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So you found an internship, and after that a job, and ended up staying in the Netherlands.
Yeah, actually, I first found an internship in Denmark, and they basically chose me because I speak Dutch and English, and Dutch and German, but for various reasons I didn't go on with it, and I chose for the Dutch job.
And where in the Netherlands do you live now?
I live in the south of the Netherlands, in a town close to Eindhoven.
Okay, somewhere close to Eindhoven, some smaller place.
Yeah, close to the border with Belgium, and also Germany.
Yeah. So do you speak mainly Dutch in your job and everyday life?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
So this weekend I was in France, and I speak French with friends and all, and I speak French, but my mind was constantly going back to Dutch.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was really bizarre because French is a lot closer, obviously, to my native language, but not having spoken French in a long while and speaking Dutch on a daily basis, I was just brought back to it all the time. So yeah.
And how has your language learning routine been lately?
So I don't really have a set language routine besides maybe using Duolingo every day or almost every day. It's more like I try to learn a lot passively. So even just by browsing social media and reading stuff, talking to people, of course. And most languages I speak them at a level good enough to just learn passively. Then I have Finnish, Japanese, and Icelandic, for which I actually need to study and not really good level yet. And for those, I try to sit and study at least like once a week. It really depends on the period, how I feel, how tired I am, and all to do that, how motivated I feel to do that. But for that, yeah, I if I want to speak them, I first need to just sit, write down stuff, translate, and all. And I use both online courses, apps like Duolingo, as I said, and just online resources in general, textbooks also, of course. But I don't have a set routine. It's more like I have the resources I'm using in that period, and I try to stick to them. And since it's not really stuff that I feel like doing every day, I try to do it like in the weekend. Then I have period I'm super motivated, and I do it like almost every evening or every other evening, like I had like 1 month ago. But otherwise, yeah, it's more like passive learning apps and some more energy training thing in the weekend.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Duolingo phrase?
Good question.
Or I guess you have also noticed that they have some quite crazy phrases sometimes.
Yeah. Right now, I can't think of any I found myself, but a few days ago, a friend of mine sent me one, which was in Danish. because I was talking to him about like going to Denmark and all, and it was like it was kind of vulgar.
It doesn't matter.
But it was like the men's use something. So you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would have to look for them now, but there are indeed many. But the last one I heard was that one.
Yeah. I've I've been filming a few years now. I've actually filmed already 45 episodes of like crazy Duolingo phrases in real life. We actually have also the Duolingo mascot now
Yeah.
for our videos. So I'm a big fan of crazy Duolingo phrases, and also my friends and my wife. We could actually collect those crazy phrases. Which language excites you the most currently from like maybe the new ones or from any of those that you're studying?
Well, since I went to France this weekend, I got really into getting back at learning French. I'm at quite decent conversational level, but still I have a lot of gaps, like words I forgot and all, and just verbs, which are not really my favorite thing in French.
Yeah.
And I really got motivated into it. I actually kind of gave up on it after high school because it just was, I liked it, but it wasn't like my favorite language. So I just concentrated fully on Germanic languages and kind of gave up on French. But after that, I got really motivated into, yeah, continuing studying it and maybe also exercising it more with people and all that. And besides that, well, I like all my languages, so I'm excited about all of them. But I'm always really glad about kind of studying Finnish or Japanese or Icelandic because it's really tiring because there's a lot you need to learn and it's really different from the languages you already speak. So you really need to be concentrated and be ready to spend an hour or two or three just doing that. But I'm always kind of excited about it because you know that you have a lot to learn and a lot you can do with it, but you still haven't done it. That you still haven't done. And the idea of step by step going into direction which is fluency is definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And you know, you have a lot of work to do, and yeah, just concentrate on it.
I guess you get a bit of help from German when you study Icelandic, especially the cases and that stuff. But I guess maybe Finnish and Japanese are more distant than the languages you have been studying before. If there are some things in the grammar or any part of the language in Japanese or Finnish or even Icelandic, does something come into your mind now? Like what's
Well,
difficult or what's easy, maybe?
I would just say something about all of them. The easiest for me is Icelandic because it's related to languages I already speak, and it has the Indo-European kind of structure. So it's like I would say it's just an overcomplicated version of languages I already speak.
Yeah.
It's not completely weird. And as you said, having studied German, you also already know how cases work and all that. Icelandic is not the same as German, but the concepts about it are similar. And a lot of words are like not connected to others because of language purism and all that. So a lot of words might look completely unknown to me, but still you have quite a few words that are related to Scandinavian languages or Germanic languages, and yeah, you can kind of follow what you're reading when you're reading a text. While for Finnish, it's a whole other story. Like, if you gave me the same text in Finnish and Icelandic, I think even though I've studied them for more or less the same amount of time, Finnish will definitely be more of a challenge. Sometimes I do have a text that's like quite understandable to me, but when that happens, usually it's like course books texts. So it's not like some random thing you see online. And usually, when I find that kind of stuff, I understand it in Icelandic. But if it's not adjusted to my level, I find it really hard to understand it in Finnish. Like I always have to take the entire sentence and put it in Google Translator, and then maybe I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense with these words and this verb. But since everything is so different, sometimes it's just hard because the vocabulary is completely different, and sometimes even with words which are like loan words from Swedish, they have like the first consonant missing, like school, quali, right?
Koulu.
Instead of it doesn't have the S, so you're like your brain is kind of confused because the first part is the one that like rings a bell. So Finnish has some things like that. And in general, the vocabulary is completely different. The grammar is completely different. How everything works is different. So it's quite a challenge. Like sometimes even to understand grammar rules, you just really need to sit there and concentrate and translate every single word. So yeah, it's definitely more complicated. And Japanese, well, Japanese grammar is per se not super hard, but just like Finnish, it works in a very different way than Indo-European languages or languages I'm used to at least. So you really need to focus and understand how it is and how it works. Even if it's not that hard per se, you have to just really understand it. You cannot give it for granted. And the same goes for vocabulary, that it's all different. You can't just understand a word by chance because it's similar to your mother tongue. That's not gonna happen. And in Japanese, you also have the kanji, which is another problem. And just like with vocabulary, you need to learn every single kanji from scratch.
How many kanji do you remember, or how many kanji can you write or read?
I don't know. Kanjis that I can read, I think there must be a few hundreds, 100 or a few hundred. I have no idea actually, because there are a lot I can recognize easily, but if you ask me to write them, I can't really do it. Like maybe I know that there's this radical, but I can't write them well. Kanjis that I can write, I guess they're like 100 or below 100, or a lot below 100. I don't know, because I've never really counted them.
How long did
yeah, sorry?
How long did it take time to learn hiragana and katakana for you? And which one did you learn first?
It was really a slow process. I actually started when I was like 14. And I wasn't really learning Japanese. Maybe I was just too lazy for that, or I didn't really have discipline. I wanted to learn to write in it, and I would often exercise it just writing down names of people in Japanese, so with katakana. But I also learned hiragana kind of simultaneously. So I didn't really learn one and then the other. It was mixed because I kind of used it to learn words that would be written both in one and the other. I think in total it was like 1 year, but it was a really slow process. It's not like one day I started and I was like, okay, now you're gonna learn hiragana and katakana, and we're gonna do it, and I want to be able to read it in a month or something. It was really randomly like, oh yeah, I want to learn how to write the name of this person, and oh look, there this word, so you write sa like that. It was really gradual, you know. Then maybe you see something online and you end up exercising or remembering that hiragana or katakana. So yeah, it was just a slow process. Like I guess it took 1 year or something to reach a level where I could recognize my right notes.
Yeah, I was curious because I'm myself in the process. I had Japanese beginners course this year, so we learned the hiragana. But in the next course, we are supposed to learn katakana, but I'm not sure if I have time to attend the course. But yeah, and so it was half a year ago, and I was like, I should start learning katakana and actually practice the hiragana so I won't forget them because I've had all other stuff. So that's why I was interested to know how it went with you. What about, can you mention something, what interested you in Japanese and Finnish and Icelandic? Like why an Italian girl wanted to learn these languages, maybe for which purposes, or if there are any purposes?
Well, when I was really young, like 12, 11, so I started being really fascinated by the Japanese culture, also through anime and all that, but actually in general Japanese culture. And so of course I also wanted to learn the language, and that basically just started like that. For Finnish and Icelandic, it was more like similarly to Japanese in a way, that I was really interested in the country and the culture. I found them really interesting and fascinating. And so I just told myself during the pandemic, hey, let's do this. There's no really specific reason, I guess, just being interested in the country and culture. I think first came the country and culture, and then the fact that I liked how the language sounded and all that.
Yeah. Are there some interesting aspects of these cultures, like in Japan, Finland, Iceland, from your perspective?
Well, not necessarily culture related, but still something special of Finnish and Icelandic, that they're basically kind of the outsiders of the Nordic languages. Like you have the Scandinavian trio, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian, which are really similar, also quite simple if compared to English learn and all that. And then you have Icelandic, which is like basically a frozen Old Norse, and it also has the thorn, you know, this special letters, and so that, and they have also very unique pronunciation to me. And then Finnish is even more of an outsider because it's just not an Indo-European language, and it's just really unique in its grammar and all. And I remember being actually really interested in understanding how the language works. Like before saying, oh, I want to become fluent, I want to have conversations with people and all that. I was really interested for both of these two languages to understand how it worked, how the grammar was, what was special of them. All the cases of Finnish, how they actually were, like compared to German cases and all that. And as I said, I find them just really unique languages. If you look at their neighbors, at least, kind of the special outsiders. So yeah, and then you have the vowel harmony in Finnish, and the fact that you have like to say something is in something, you don't have the preposition, but you put sa at the end, and that's just not something you find in all the other languages I spoke. So I was so interested in understanding how the grammar works, and now I am at the point where, of course, I have a lot to learn and a lot of aspects of the grammar to understand and just study. But I kind of got past that phase where I'm just so curious about the language. I understand how it works at all, and now I'm more like, okay, I want to be able to have decent conversations someday. But at first, I was really motivated by understanding and finding out how this unique and special languages work, grammar-wise, especially.
Yeah. So maybe you like challenges also.
Yeah, kind of. I guess I'm not too crazy. I consider myself a person who speaks a lot of languages, but is kind of in her own comfort zone. Like, I can say, oh yeah, I speak 6, 7, 8 languages, whatever, but most of them are the same language family, and 3 of them are literally almost like dialects in the same language. So, I don't know, but Finnish, Japanese, and Icelandic are definitely challenging. And I also have to say that I respect a lot people who just learned like Chinese and Arabic and Korean, because they're like a whole other level to me. Like, I respect a lot of people learning Chinese. To me, it's just crazy. Like, I can speak 5 Germanic languages, but to learn Chinese, oh God, I don't even dare. And it's also a lot, learning languages, it's a lot about your own personal interests. So I'm really interested, and I've always been fascinated by Nordic languages, and I like to do that even when it's hard, like Icelandic or Finnish. But I don't have that motivation for Chinese or Korean or Arabic, for example.
Yeah.
If I had that interest in the culture, country, and all that, I would probably see it differently. And I would see somebody speaking all Germanic languages absolutely crazy. But I am like that, so.
Yeah. Are everyone in your family like that?
No, definitely not. My siblings only speak English.
How many sisters or brothers do you have?
One sister and one brother. I don't think that's well, but I've never heard him speaking English more than like one sentence, so I have no idea.
So they both speak Italian and bit English.
Yeah, I think my sister is quite good at it. My brother probably manages speaking English okay, but it's like, you know, that thick Italian accent that I don't know if it's because he doesn't put so much effort in it, but you're like not really interested in sounding perfect and having the like not making grammar mistakes and all. My dad he speaks English, but it's mostly because he was kind of forced to it. as he works for an American company. So he started there at a young age, and he was constantly had to communicate with colleagues from other countries, and he had to be able to explain things in English. So whether you liked it or not, you learn to speak it. And yeah, he makes grammar mistakes now and then, but he has conversations without any problems. And my mother, she actually really liked languages when she was in high school, and I think she was quite good at English, though they didn't study it for as many years as we do now at the time. But working as a physiotherapist who works in a hospital with old people, dialect is much more useful than English. So she doesn't really get to exercise it. And when she does speak it, and there are, for example, visitors from other countries home, she does her best, she tries her best, but she finds it kind of hard. Like, with some help, she does have conversations and find her way through, but she's not fluent. Still, I would say above the Italian average.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could say she speaks English, but besides me, nobody speaks a second foreign language. If not extremely basic, like both of my siblings also had French in middle school, but I don't think they speak any French now, besides maybe remembering how you say hello and how are you.
Yeah. And from your perspective, what do you think about the average Italian? If you think about the people you know, your friends maybe, and maybe elsewhere in Italy, what languages Italians usually speak, and how common is it to speak maybe fluent English or a second or third foreign language?
So, speaking fluent English is not, I don't think it is that common. Of course, there's a difference between different generations. It's much more common for people from my generation, but I'm kind of in a bubble where a lot of people I know attended schools and universities where you had to have a decent level of English. If I had different friend groups, I couldn't probably say the same. I would say that the average person of my age maybe struggles, but can have conversations in English, whereas the average person of my parents' age, so let's say baby boomers, barely speaks it at all. Like, if they do, it's like memories from school, and it's kind of quite basic, unless you like to work at a multinational company, or for some personal reasons you talk with people from abroad or things like that. But otherwise, I think it's quite hard to find a person 50 and above who speaks English. Like, I think my family is quite above average. But yeah, and for the generation of my grandparents, it's almost impossible to find someone speaking fluent English, unless you were like a high school teacher or a person who got a degree in languages. But it's really hard. Like, my grandparents, besides the fact that they only attended school until the 5th grade or something, they don't even know how English sounds. Because we also, like, you might know that in Italy, everything like movies and series
Dubbing,
from
yeah.
their dubbed. So even if you would be interested in, if you don't look up stuff online, you don't really get to hear English. And my grandparents don't use internet. But even people who use internet, if they don't really have the will to search for that stuff or that content, they probably won't really get to hear much English at all. Nowadays with Netflix and all that stuff, maybe there's a bigger tendency to listen to stuff in the original language, in English. But for example, when I was like 14, I was really motivated into watching movies with subtitles, and for that you have to get DVDs and choose the options with original language and subtitles, because that's not the standard, unlike in other countries. And they didn't want to, because they were like, oh, but then I have to concentrate to follow the subtitles and I can't enjoy the movie to the fullest. And they're not people who are completely unused to English. My mother, maybe she is, but my dad, for example, he is used to English. He speaks it, I think, on a daily basis. But still, culturally, you're not really that interested in hearing it or having that much to do with it. And if you're my grandparents' generation who only had the TV, you're not ever gonna hear it. So things are improving, but I think even for my generation, there are people who really, really struggle with English, even having studied it for 10 years or something at school. Then there's the problem that the Italian school focuses a bit too much on grammar and not conversation. My teacher at high school, he gave us in the last year photocopy about subjunctive in English, which doesn't exist. Like native speakers don't even know what it is. But it was more like to complete the program of like all grammar topics. And he had the last surprise test with subjunctive, and it was the only ever test I had a grade below average in English or any language, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was because I was so used at the time to speak English so much more compared to my schoolmates, because I spoke online with people. So I was really used to English and kind of learned it in a natural way by talking to others. But for things that people don't use, like subjunctive, I couldn't just make it up like I could for other things. And so that happened, but whatever.
Where did you use it? Yeah. I
was just saying, whereas for other grammar topics like the continuous forms, like I have been doing this, blah blah blah. I didn't have any problems. Maybe it's also because I tend to be good at languages. I don't know, but I think that had a lot to do with the fact that I was just used and I was exposed to English on a daily basis by talking to people and reading stuff online, which most of my schoolmates didn't have. So I could improvise easily with that, but they couldn't. And by just having to fill in phrases in grammar exercises, you're not really gonna get it fluent level, I think.
Where did you speak with people, or was it more like reading and writing, or was it also speaking?
So when I was 14, I made an account on DeviantArt.
Where?
DeviantArt, it's a website.
Oh yeah, I know DeviantArt.
Yeah, it still exists. It's a website for artists to post their artworks and all. And it was international, of course, so I had to speak English with people. And if I look back at the very first things that I would write and messages to others, I see so many grammar mistakes, so many. And a lot of those things, a lot of those kind of mistakes got fixed without me even noticing it, or without realizing at some point, oh yeah, this is correct, this is wrong.
Mhm.
I think I just learned a lot of things by continuously talking to people and reading stuff and learning new vocabulary. And I learned it or improved it at least in a very natural way. So yeah, I think that definitely has a big impact on my English online, the internet.
Yeah. As a language nerd, I think you have seen these articles about like top 5, top 10 hardest languages in the world. What do you think about those, and do you have any opinion? What are like the hardest ones?
Well, generally, to say that a language is hard or is easy is a matter of comparison. So of course, Finnish will probably be kind of easy for Estonians, but it won't be for everybody else.
Yeah.
And then you also have to see the single aspects, if it's pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, writing system, whatever. But I think you could say that like Chinese and Arabic are among the hardest in the world, because they have, like Chinese and I think also Arabic, they have a really complicated pronunciation. They both have, although Chinese is worse, I guess, difficult writing system. Though grammar, I can speak for Arabic, but I know Chinese grammar is not that hard technically, but still it depends where you're coming from, because if you're coming from an Asian language, it's probably easier. If you come from an European languages, it's not that hard per se, but the fact that it makes it completely different makes it hard for you. Whereas for me as an Italian speaker, French or Spanish are not that much of a big deal, but for just a German or English speaker, French and Spanish grammar are a lot harder. So it's kind of hard to tell. For me, if I had to say it for me, I would say Chinese, Vietnamese, Arabic, because of tones in Chinese and Vietnamese. It's something that I'm like, I can't understand how people could master that if you're not native in that language. Generally, I think Chinese is recognized as one of the hardest languages. So, yeah, I would say Asian languages in general and Arabic, then maybe also Finnish, but maybe it's still because I'm interested in it, but for me, Finnish is much more accessible, besides the fact that it has a Latin writing system. So yeah, I would just say languages that are really far away from the languages I already speak.
Yeah.
Which is no answer, but
no, that was a good answer. Are you interested in any dead languages?
Well, as I said, I find Latin kind of interesting. It was also used as the language of science for many centuries, and I think it does look kind of fascinating with the cases and all that, and all the cultural value it has had in the European civilization. I guess the same kind of goes for ancient Greek, but I see Latin as more interesting. maybe because it's closer to my native language and also kind of more accessible.
Yeah.
But besides those two, so say the classical ones, I don't think there's that language. At least if you mean the ancient ones, because if you mean that language is like language that went recently extinct or is
any
likely
extinct
to
language.
be extinct, then I would say all the Celtic languages. Many are unfortunately not in a really good situation. Then you have, you have like Gothic. So the East Germanic languages, which are not extinct, I would really be interested in those also because I might happen to have Gothic people among my ancestors.
Mm.
And yeah, it's just a branch of the Germanic languages which got lost, and I'm really interested in Germanic languages, so that would definitely be a part I would be interested in deepening my knowledge about, and yeah, not really studying to a point where you can hold a conversation, but finding more about it. I think I would like that.
Yeah, I think Gothic has its own script as well. So, are you interested in different scripts?
Yeah, totally. I can write and read in Cyrillic and Greek, though not as well as Cyrillic. But I taught myself a couple years ago how to write in both. And I don't speak any Russian or any Greek,
Yeah.
but I like to be able to
Mhm.
read them, or like write down names in those. I find it really satisfying. Though it's kind of a shame because, like, yeah, you can read what it's written, but you have no idea what it is saying.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool to know other scripts. Then, of course, Japanese, and some Korean. I'm really slow in reading Korean, and I'm still kind of confused with the Korean vowel sounds. But yeah, I guess I could say that I can write and read Korean, though incredibly slow. But I know how it works. I know the single
Yeah.
pieces. And,
Yeah. It's frustrating the Hanguls when like there are I think three combinations which are then pronounced as e like e or
yeah.
like all the combinations when it becomes like we or wo or yeah, that's a bit tricky. What do you think? What's your current language challenge or goal with languages? Is it to mainly improve the ones that you already know in some level, or what?
Yeah, I would say my goal is just continuously exercising and maintaining the languages I already speak, and of course improving them. For the languages I am still a beginner at, with really slow learning, but still slowly but steadily. So Finnish, Icelandic, and Japanese. I don't know if my goal is fluency yet. Like I'm really taking it easy and trying to enjoy the journey, but definitely getting better at it and being able to have conversations in it, which I technically am able to, but it's still a basic level. And yeah, I just want to constantly improving it, and I don't think I ever want to give up on them. I know it takes incredibly long because they are quite a lot, and I sometimes take breaks and all that, and I have a lot of other languages I want to maintain, but just continuing putting my effort on them, and then if it do take 10 years to be fluent if I will never get fluent or whatever. I just don't think I will ever give up on them. I will still try now and then to open a Finnish book and write down another dialogue and that.
Yeah. What would you recommend the Italian or any other people who are not interested in languages? Why it would be important to learn languages and what advantages are there?
Well, first of all, it keeps your brain healthy against Alzheimer, dementia, and that.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think it's just nice to, first of all, being able to communicate with people from other countries. And if you not only are able to communicate with them in English, but actually speak their own language, you have a big insight into their own culture and their own way of life, and just a lot of things which makes it super interesting and kind of gets you closer to them. Then it doesn't mean that you have to be fluent or you have to always be able to hold conversations in those languages, but still you have like a kind of insider view by speaking their language that you wouldn't have otherwise. Just like being able to read their websites and listening to videos in their languages. Maybe you won't understand everything, but you still get to taste a bit of their culture and country and way of living that you wouldn't have by just speaking English.
Do you think people will still learn languages in the future when we have technology and we have like instant translators and other stuff?
I think that won't help to motivate people to learn languages, but still, if you don't speak another person's language, you miss a lot of the human contact, like speaking through a machine is not the same as just talking to somebody in their own language. It's just something different. Then of course for things like work and job possibilities and job in the job market and all that, it will probably won't be the same as it is without online translators and artificial intelligence and all that. But as for the human contact, artificial intelligence will not ever be able to replace that. It's like it's a key to somebody else's heart, I think they say. Like you really, I don't know, you just have a human contact with their own language that you will never have by using a machine.
Yeah.
Or using a third language, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. But do you think AI and other technology will help us learn more efficiently languages?
Yeah, I'm quite. I was myself. I definitely improved my languages a lot thanks to that. Just stupid things like Google translating, but then you Google Translate and you're like, oh yeah, so this is the word for this. And without Google translating, you would have had to own a dictionary and then look up for that word. And how motivating is that? I don't think I would have been as motivated to learn a language if I had to buy a dictionary for every single language and go through it every time I have to tell something to somebody else. I would just either use a language I already know or not communicate at all, because it's just too energy consuming nowadays. You want to talk to somebody in their language and you speak it, but maybe you miss a lot of vocabulary. You just throw it on Google Translator and maybe you won't remember all those words, but some will definitely get stuck in your head. And the time after it, you will know them without having to look for them. And so you keep improving and you keep expanding your knowledge. It's how I learned most of the languages I currently speak, I think, by Google translating and saying, okay, this is how you say this, and next time being able to say it without Google Translator. And the same actually goes for grammar a bit. How to conjugate verbs. You put it on Google Translator and you find it, and next time you know what's the past participle of a given verb without looking it up. And so you keep building up your knowledge. And passive learning on just reading content online, of course, helps a lot, just like talking to people. And that's all a part of technology and internet and all that. So yeah, I don't think it makes us lazier, or maybe it does, but at least for me, it also gives a big boost to improve language and expand your knowledge in it, which you wouldn't have if you would have to do everything manually or buy stuff or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. What if someone out there is learning a rare Uralic language, like Sami language or some Russian Uralic languages? They can't use Google Translate, but what can they do?
Well, they can't use Google Translator, but they can still find resources about it.
What?
So it will definitely not be as easy as learning Spanish, but you will probably still find something. Then, yeah, of course, if you want to speak Inari Sami, you will probably have to go to people in some village that speak it. Otherwise, you won't really have a chance to exercise it or learn it at all. And you have to collect vocabulary from like those very people. But yeah.
Actually, I learned this myself a week ago. There is actually something which is like Google Translate, but for around 20 Uralic languages. I had one Komi speaker from Russia, Komi Republic, who's actually in the team which has been developing this in Estonia. So I actually found him on Twitter and got on my show a week ago, and I've actually used it for a few days in my Northern Sami studies, and yeah, it's pretty cool. There are still mistakes. I can notice the mistakes because I'm on a beginner level, and I usually try to translate from Finnish or Estonian because I see the English one has sometimes mistakes. But yeah, they have like all the Mari, Komi, Udmurt, rare languages, and this makes it, at least for me and maybe for some other people, much easier to learn these languages. I'm going to maybe put a link somewhere here, and if you're also interested, I can also give you the link. It's actually quite cool.
Yeah, there's also an app to learn indigenous languages, among which I think only Northern Sami of the Sami languages.
Okay.
And it's called Indiland. But I also have a list of resources. So
wow, yeah, you can.
I have some things for Sami languages as well.
Oh, that's good. Okay, I have one final question to you. This is a like theoretic question. So if you had two options, the first one would be that you could immediately speak 10 biggest languages of the world, but nothing else, or 1,000 smallest ones. So from the 7,000, the 1,000 smallest one perfectly, but you couldn't speak other ones.
I would say that it depends what these languages are. So, well, I guess for the 10 biggest languages, you will have Chinese, Indian languages, English, Spanish, French, German, Italian.
Italian is not in top 10
not
actually.
in the top 10. Indonesian, I don't know. And for like 3 of them, I would be interested. But for the other ones, I would probably rather speak Faroese or Frisian.
Yeah.
So it also depends. As you said, you can't speak any other languages if you speak the 10 big ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can learn and speak big languages by speaking the small ones, then I would choose to speak the small one. And I don't need 1,000, much less.
Okay.
I think I would go for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have now something that we didn't discuss or anything to say?
Maybe the only thing is that we haven't talked lots about Germanic languages and my process in learning them, which is something kind of big about myself.
Sure.
But yeah, we would need another podcast to go with that.
So there's so much to tell about that topic.
Yeah, I think I would have a lot to say. But I think for this time we went through quite a few interesting topics also about my dialects at the beginning, which was kind of unexpected. So yeah, I think we got to talk about a lot of things, and if you don't want to spend another 2 hours, I think that was it for this time.
Well, I have no time limits, but I think you're almost hungry, and so yeah, maybe if you think that it's too long, maybe we'll have it on another time then. Anyways, I'm going to have all Chiara's links down here in the description section, and we have also some Duolingo videos that I've done with my wife. They're also down there, and we have like online shop with language learning resources. You can all find them here. Thanks, Chiara, for being a guest. It was a really nice discussion with you.
Kiitos paljon.
Kiitos someone. And thank you for everyone who made it this far. I hope there are many people. And see you all in the next episode. Bye.